Hey everyone, and welcome to the start of another reading vlog. So this is going to be my spoiler-filled reading vlog for both The Well of Ascension and The Hero of Ages. That's the wrong way around. The Hero of Ages by Brandon Sanderson. So these are books 2 and 3 in the Mistborn series. I read The Final Empire, which is book 1, back in, I think it was June. I know that I did a spoiler-free reading vlog. Shush. I know that I did a spoiler-free reading vlog when I read that book. So I'll leave it linked in the description and in the cards if you did want to check it out. But I thought that for books 2 and 3, it would be more fun if I did a spoiler-filled reading vlog. So if you haven't read this series and you don't want to be spoiled, then it's probably best to click off now. I promise I won't be offended because yeah, this vlog is going to have spoilers from this point onwards. So I did make a start on The Well of Ascension last night. I'm about 34 pages in. I'm quite glad actually that this book does have a summary and a glossary at the back. Glossary, is that the right word? There's a quick overview of all of the different metals and their abilities, which I'm really grateful for, because even though it's only been like 3 or 4 months since I read the first book, there are a few little details that I had forgotten. In terms of my thoughts so far, obviously I'm only about 30 pages in, so I don't have many thoughts so far, but I do like that this picks up about a year after the end of the first book. So there is that time jump where things have progressed, but then it's also still quite fresh to what happened at the end of the first book. And I've noticed that there seems to be quite a big focus on Vin and Elend's relationship already. Have I pronounced that right? Elend? There seems to have been quite a big focus on their relationship so far. And I, during The Final Empire, wasn't a huge fan of the way that Vin and Elend's relationship was built up. I wouldn't say that I hate them together, but I also didn't feel like it was, I don't feel like it was built up in a way that I felt really invested in them as a couple. I do love Vin as a character, and so I'm hoping that through this book, maybe I'll start to like her and Elend together. We'll see how it goes though, because I don't have many expectations going into this book. I mean, I loved the first book. Like, I would say that that is one of my all-time favourite fantasies, and so I do have high expectations for this. I'm obviously really hoping that I'm going to love it. And my dad recently read this, and he is currently reading The Hero of Ages. It's a little bit annoying that I actually recommended The Final Empire to him, and he read it not long after I did, but because his TBR is a lot shorter than mine, he got round to reading The Well of Ascension quite quickly afterwards, and then he's now listening to the audiobook for The Hero of Ages. So I've told him, do not tell me anything. I don't want to know what you think yet, as horrible as that sounds, but I don't want any spoilers. I don't want to be influenced by anyone else. I do know that he did really love The Well of Ascension, and I'm pretty sure that he said he enjoyed this more than the first book. And I have heard a few people actually say that this book gets a lot more political, and my favourite type of fantasy is political fantasies. So everyone, so I wasn't sure how often I should update this vlog because I don't want it to be too long, and also I don't want it to be too boring, but I thought that because I know that these books are split into sections, then maybe it would be a good idea to do an update after each section. And I have just got to the end of part 1. I actually got to the end of it last night, so I thought that now would probably be a good time to talk through some initial thoughts and feelings so far. Going into this book, I really wasn't sure what to expect, because the way that book 1 ended, I felt like that could have worked as a standalone, even though I did still have a few questions, mostly because throughout the first book, it kept mentioning The Well of Ascension and The Hero of Ages, but obviously in reference to the guy that we were led to believe turned into the Lord Ruler. I was really confused why those kept being mentioned when obviously books 2 and 3 are called The Well of Ascension and The Hero of Ages. So I'm really interested to see what the link is. So far there are, I guess, 3 or 4 main plot points, because the main plot point is that there's these two armies, so Ellen's father and this other army that are outside the gates to Lutherdale, and they're wanting to get in, and so Ellen is trying to deal with that whole situation and work out the politics behind what they should do. Then there's also something happening with Vin and how every time she goes out at night patrolling, there's this Mistborn who she's calling the Watcher, who is watching her and who is following her, and don't know who that is or why they're so interested in Vin, other than the obvious reason that she was the person who killed the Lord Ruler. Then we're also following Sazed or Sazed. I really need to learn how to pronounce these names, but we're also following Sazed and Marsh, who are investigating, I guess, because mists have started to appear during the daytime. The last part that I got to was where these bones were found, and so it appears that a Chandra has taken on the form of someone within Vin and Ellen's inner circle, but we don't know who. And so that's really interesting because I'm assuming that throughout the rest of this book, I'm going to be making predictions over who the imposter might be. I am also trying to pay attention to the start of each chapter, because at the start of each chapter, you have these little diary entries, and I know that in the first book, those parts did end up being quite important. So yeah, basically, really enjoying this so far because I love a book where I can try and work things out and where there is a little bit of mystery and where you can come up with theories as to what might be going on and what might end up happening. Hey everyone, so I am now at the end of part 2 of The Well of Ascension. So I'm over a third of the way through, but not quite halfway through. What page am I on? I think I'm on page 325, and this is a 700 and something page book. So yeah, I still have quite a while to go, but I definitely feel like I'm back in this world. I feel absorbed, and I'm just really enjoying the atmosphere and being with these characters and theorising how everything's going to come together, because what I have noticed is that there's a lot of layers to this plot and there's a lot of things that are going on. I think I'm starting to see how certain things are connected, but also I still am really confused about certain things, and I still have quite a lot of questions. I have to say, I still don't feel that much chemistry between Ellen and Vin, and I don't know what to make of it, because I feel like Brandon Sanderson is still really good at building relationships between characters, and I actually feel like Vin has more chemistry with Zane, who we now know is Ellen's brother, and he's the Mistborn that was following Vin. I don't know whether we can trust him though, because it feels like he might be playing on Vin's insecurities and trying to convince her that the rest of the team are just using her. And yeah, still don't really know how I feel about him, but I did have a theory on who the spy might be, but I think it's a really obvious theory because I was going through all of the members of the inner circle, all of the main characters, and Dockson is the only one who isn't an Allomancer. And then there was a moment just where Dockson got in the same carriage as Elland, and Elland was thinking, well, why is Dockson doing that? He doesn't like me. Surely he would usually get in the other carriage. But I feel like that is really obvious though. I feel like it would be too obvious if it was him, because he is the obvious choice, because the others are all Allomancers, and so Vin would be able to work out that they're not the Chandra. Another question I have at the moment is, what is this deepness that keeps being referred to? Because I feel like it might be related to the mists that are coming out in the daytime, but again, I feel like that might be just a completely obvious theory. The part that I've just got to is the bit where the Assembly have just announced that they're gonna remove Elland as the king because they don't have any trust in him, which actually there was something that was mentioned earlier in the book about how there are these counterfeit coins that are being distributed around the city, and Elland kept making comments about how he doesn't have time to deal with the day-to-day stuff that's happening in the city. And so I'm wondering whether that was foreshadowing for the fact that he's now been removed as the leader. Really interested to see who he's going to be replaced with and what's going to happen next. Hey everyone, so this is going to be a really quick update just to let you know that I am at the end of part 3 of The Well of Ascension. So I think that this book is split into 5 parts. I tried to check, but I didn't want to look too closely because I didn't want to accidentally spoil myself, but I think that I'm over 2/3 of the way through, almost 2/3 of the way through, and things are starting to get really, really tense because we've just learned that Elland is no longer the king. He's been voted out and Lord Penrod has been voted in. And I don't really know what Elland was thinking about. Like, I understand that he's this stand-up guy and he wants to do the right thing, but he could have got away with that. He didn't have to let people change their votes because there was 2 people that voted for Lord Set and he let them change their vote and they voted for his opponent. So now he's not the king anymore. And I mean, I don't know what he's going to do with himself. I'm assuming that the team are still going to be trying to solve the problem of these armies that are wanting to attack the city, because I feel like they all have this sense of responsibility to look after this city because Calcia obviously died to overthrow the Lord Ruler. And so, yeah, interested to see where this is going to go next. It's also been mentioned that the mist may be the deepness and they may be linked or they may be the same thing, which I think I mentioned earlier in the vlog that was one of my theories, but I feel like there's more to learn there still. I've also been trying to work out whether Vin actually is the Hero of Ages because it's been very, very strongly hinted at and she is trying to work it out herself whether she is this prophesized hero because she keeps hearing this thumping in her head. And I don't think that she is. I think that because of the type of writer that Brandon Sanderson is, I think that the more obvious explanation isn't going to be the full story, even if it is partially true. I think that he is just the type of writer that likes things to be unpredictable. So I am now at the end of part 4 of The Well of Ascension, and oh my goodness, a lot has happened in this section. So I'm going to try and summarise my feelings because that last scene was pretty intense. So Zane is now gone, which I'm kind of sad about because I was hoping that he would have some sort of redemption arc, but we did learn that Orsa was actually the traitor Chandra, which I had considered actually, but then I kind of dismissed it. It looks like the team have now accepted that the city is going to fall, and so they've conspired to send Vin and Elland away so that they're not there when it happens. There has been a lot of focus on Vin and Elland's relationship, especially in that last chapter, because they are now married. I think. I'm not sure whether CZ made up that ceremony as a way of getting them committed so that they'll leave the city together. But it is irritating me just a little bit, the amount of times that Vin has been thinking that she's not good enough for Elland. And I just want to shake her because it feels really repetitive and I just want her to get some confidence. It's not enough that it's massively affecting my enjoyment, but I am hoping that now they're married, hopefully that'll be toned down just a little bit. The only other thing I was thinking about actually was Calcia's brother, because what is he doing at the moment? We heard from him at the start of the book and then we haven't heard from him since. And so is it going to be one of those here come the cavalry situations? I don't know, but I'm really excited for this last section. So I finished reading The Well of Ascension and it has been 24 hours actually now since I finished reading this book, and I still am really, really struggling to form coherent thoughts, but I'm going to have a go at summarising how I felt throughout the last section of this book, or the last 2 sections actually, because I didn't realise when I filmed my last update for this vlog that I actually had 2 parts left. I thought that I was on the final part, but then I got to the end of part 5 and I thought, oh wait, I still have another section to go. But I was in the zone and I was in the story and things were happening and I didn't want to put the book down. In comparison to the first book, the ending to this didn't have as much of an emotional impact on me that I was expecting. And I think it's because in the first book, I was not expecting Calcia to die at all, even though looking back, the clues were there. And I think if I were ever to reread that book, then it would be really interesting to see how much it was foreshadowed. Whereas with this book, I felt like we were building up to this epic battle scene. And so I was expecting that some characters wouldn't make it out alive. And the characters that did die weren't my favourite characters. And so, yeah, it just didn't have as much of an emotional impact on me that I was expecting. I was, however, right about Vin not being the Hero of Ages, because the Hero of Ages doesn't exist, which I think this is what has been taking me a long time to get my head around, is that, so I think I'm understanding this right, the thing in the well created this prophecy so that it could try and orchestrate its own release, and that's why there are all these conflicting accounts on the Hero of Ages. Also, Elend is now Mistborn, which I don't know how I feel about that, because it felt like it kind of came out of nowhere. It's still 5 stars though, and I am interested to see especially how Sazed's character develops in the 3rd book, because we saw at the end of the 2nd book how he was really struggling with his grief after losing Tindwyl. Although I am starting to notice a little bit of a pattern with this series, which I think I've already kind of touched on, in that I find the friendships in this series believable, but I'm struggling with the romantic relationships. I didn't really feel like Sazed and Tindwyl's relationship was that well developed for me to really care when she died. However, I have started the 3rd book in the series already, and it is really interesting seeing how Sazed is now really struggling with religion, because obviously he's always really been interested in religion. So I am still really intrigued to see how that develops and how that affects him throughout the 3rd book. Hey everyone, so last night I made it as far as page 159 of the Hero of Ages. I should mention actually that I didn't bother reading the end of the blurb of the book, because I wanted to go in not knowing anything and just try and work it out for myself. I thought it would be more fun that way. And what I've learned so far is that the world is falling apart. Basically, it looks like the mist is eventually going to end up covering the whole empire, and people are going to die because they're not going to be able to grow any crops. And I'm assuming that the plot of this, I mean, I might be wrong, but I'm assuming that throughout this book we're going to be following Vin and Elend and the whole team as they try and stop this from happening, and they try and defeat this thing that was in the well, which we've now learned is called Ruin. What I'm looking forward to most about this book is learning more about the world and about the people of this world. So already I get a feeling that we're going to learn more about the Steel Inquisitors and also about the Khandra. I feel like now that we've moved out of Luthadel, there's even more potential to just open up the world completely, and I'm really excited. I was talking to my dad about this over the weekend because he had a completely different reaction to the end of the Well of Ascension that I did, because I think I mentioned in my last clip that with Tindwyl's death during that final battle sequence, I didn't really feel that much emotion. That makes me sound really cold-hearted, but it didn't have the emotional impact on me that I would have liked, whereas he had a completely different reaction. And I don't know whether it's because he's been listening to the audiobooks for this series, and so the characters maybe felt a little bit more real, but the way that he was describing it, and I'm trying to remember what he said, but I think that it's because he could see that Sazed and Tindwyl had the potential to really grow to love each other. I think that's why he said that he did find her death really, really sad. But yeah, I'm hoping to read another good chunk of this tonight, because it took me a lot longer to finish the Well of Ascension than I was expecting. I think because I'm enjoying this series so much, I don't want it to end. And I've heard a lot of people say that the ending to this is one of the best conclusions to a series that they've ever read. And that's a little bit intimidating, so I'm scared. Hey everyone, so I am at the end of part 2 of the Hero of Ages, and I don't have a lot of thoughts on this so far, which is surprising. But what I did want to say is that I'm really appreciating, now that I'm on book 3, the way that Brandon Sanderson has constructed this world. I really like the way that throughout this series, with each book, he gives you enough information so that you can follow what's happening, but he also holds so much back that it builds that intrigue. And I spend a lot of time feeling very, very confused. I know what's going on because I know enough that I can follow it, but also I have so many questions. Like, for example, with the prophecy, the Hero of Ages prophecy, I assumed that Ruin had just created it from scratch, but now I'm starting to think, did they just manipulate a prophecy that was already out there in existence? consequence? Could it have been that there is a person that's meant to save the world, and so there is actually a Hero of Ages, just not in the way that we thought in the second book? There is also the Mist Spirit that was following Vin around, and I was thinking, could that Mist Spirit be the opposite of Ruin? Because there was a discussion earlier about how everything has balance and how there are consequences to everything. And so would it make sense if Ruin had an exact opposite? I don't know if that's what the book is implying, but yeah. Another question I was reminded of actually is how Vin has always been able to see through copper clouds, and we've known that since the first book, but it's never been explained. And so I was thinking, could that somehow tie into everything? Overall though, what I am liking about this is how there's almost these two separate storylines, because we're following Vin and Elend as they're trying to get access to this cavern, which we think is where the Lord Ruler was storing the atium and possibly something else. We're not quite sure yet. But then there's also the separate story where we're following Sazed and Spook. And Spook's chapters in particular have been really interesting because it seems like he's seen Calcia, or the ghost of Calcia, and he can now use pewter. And so I'm really interested to understand why that has happened. That is actually probably another of my favourite things about this series, is how it's very, very logical. And so even when certain things are revealed, it all makes sense. And I really like that. I probably look a mess right now, and that's because it's really, really cold in my house and my boiler is broke. So that's fun. But I have just reached the end of part 3 of the Hero of Ages. Is it part 3? Yeah, I'm about to start part 4, and Vin is locked in the cellar with her brother, who I thought was dead, but maybe I'm just remembering that completely wrong from the first book. In this last section, we've been learning a lot more about hermalurgy. I don't know how to pronounce that, but we've been learning a lot more about that. And I'm really enjoying it. I really like the way that that is adding to the whole magic systems in this world, and especially how it links in with the Colossus and the Kandra and the Steel Inquisitors and how they're created. It kind of links in with what I was saying last time about how everything in this series makes sense. And I just love how logical it is. Yeah, I am really liking how there are things from the first book that are still relevant to this book, and you can really see the development and how it all is coming together. We still don't know why Vin, at the end of book 1, was able to use the mists to defeat the Dark Ruler, the Lord Ruler, the Dark Lord. What am I saying? We still don't know why Vin was able to use the mists.
A few moments later.
Oh my goodness, so I've literally read the start of the next chapter, and it's just occurred to me that could the reason why Vin is able to pierce copper clouds be because she's got some sort of hermalogic spike somewhere, like in her body? I was thinking that she's got that earring that her mom gave her. So could that be it, or would that not work because it has to be a permanent spike? I'm not really sure, but I know that in one of Marsh's chapters earlier, it was saying that the spikes can be any size. So could that be what's going on? Have I worked it out? If I have, then I'm really excited because I feel very clever. I feel like this vlog has mostly been me trying to make predictions about this book, but failing. So I am not going to do that anymore. I mean, no, that's a lie. I am still going to make predictions about stuff, because what has just happened is we've learned that Spook was being controlled by Ruin, which I had started to suspect throughout this section, because at first I was wondering whether it might be Tensoon that was impersonating Calcia, because we saw that Tensoon has now got Calcia's bones, but there was something about the timelines that wasn't quite aligning, so I thought, no, that's not what's happening. We also got that scene between Preservation and Elend, where again things started to come together, and it seemed like Preservation was trying to get Elend to do something, or it was trying to tell Elend something, and I'm not quite sure what, but it seemed to imply that it's Preservation that's causing the mists. There's also been quite a lot of discussion around trust, and how because Elend and Vin Ruin can't really talk about their plans and their strategy because otherwise Ruin could overhear them. I feel like that's going to come into it somehow. I don't know whether I'm going to do another update now before I get to the end, because I think I'm on the last section. I don't know, I said this with the Well of Ascension and it turned out that there was actually 2 parts left, but I'm at the end of part 4. I've got part 5 left, and actually the chapter title is Trust. So maybe I was right when I was speaking before about how maybe trust has something to do with the ending, and maybe, I think it's Vin, has something up her sleeve. And oh, I am scared because I have a feeling that this ending is not going to be a happy ending. I feel like it's going to be sad, but maybe bittersweet. I'm expecting to cry at this in the same way that I cried at the end of The Final Empire. So I'm going to be honest, the closer that I got to the end of this book, the more nervous that I felt, because I was about 50 pages from the end and I couldn't work out how things were going to wrap up. And I was thinking, there's only 50 pages to go. Is this going to end up feeling really rushed? Am I going to end up feeling really disappointed? But thankfully, that did not happen. I can 100% see why so many people say that this is one of their favourite endings to a series ever, because it's one of my favourite endings to a series ever. The way that everything came together, and especially when CZ started using the religions to rebuild the world, that gave me goosebumps. Because throughout this series, I'd always wondered about the religions that CZ was talking about. I found all of that really interesting, but I also didn't quite realise the relevance. It didn't quite click until that final moment, and I just thought, wow. It was a 5 stars, just in case that wasn't completely obvious. And especially Vin and Elend, oh my goodness. Like, I know that I talked about how I didn't really feel that invested in them as a couple, but I did like them individually as characters. And so when I got to the part where Elend had his head chopped off, oh my goodness, I was not expecting that. Like, I was expecting the probably one or maybe a few of the side characters wouldn't get out alive, but I wasn't expecting both of them. And so, yeah, I almost filmed a clip last night of me just in tears, but I thought no one needs to see that. I feel really sad just in general now that I've finished this series, because it has been occupying so much space in my brain for the past 18 days, I think it's taken me to finish this series, and now I literally don't know what to read next, because how do you follow up on something like that? Any book that I read next is just not going to compare. So I think I need to just have a little bit of a break from fantasy and read something else, because wow. Definitely want to read some more of Brandon Sanderson's books, but I think I'm going to wait until next year and just give myself time to breathe. I don't know if I mentioned actually in this vlog, but this is the first series that I've read by him. So let me know in the comments what you would recommend if you have read more of his books. I was thinking of picking up either Warbreaker or Elantris next. I do have The Way of Kings on my Kindle, but I think I want to wait to start that because I know that it's quite a long series, and I also know that it's not been completed yet, and I think that I would rather wait until more books in that series have been released. I don't know what's best to do, so let me know if you do have any recommendations. I think though I am going to end the reading vlog here, so thanks for watching. If you've made it this far, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up if you liked it, and click subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you next time. Bye.